Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Michelle Rose. I'm absolutely thrilled to be with you here tonight. I can't see you all, but I know you can see my face. We have offered this session to families and teachers and staff a multitude of times in person, but this is our first online session. We wanted to make sure that we recognize that there are many family members who can't get away and be there at whatever given time. So we wanted to make sure that we had a digital option. We will be recording this session tonight so that we can load it onto the webpage as well. I just want to give a couple of housekeeping things. Just a reminder that in order to interact, you can use the Q&A function in your toolbar to pose questions. I won't be able to necessarily see them as I'm talking through sections. I will do my very best to stop periodically and look at the questions, but I will definitely pause and look at questions at the very end. As we've given a lot of these sessions, there are some frequently asked questions, so I will attempt to cover some of the questions that you have throughout the session. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. The focus of this session is growth and replication, and I will share a little bit more about what that means as we progress. So, as I already stated, I'm so excited for you to be here with us tonight. We appreciate the continuous engagement of our families and our community members at NYOS. It's a hallmark of the work that we all do collectively together. So, thank you again for being here. Again, the Q&A is an opportunity to engage in this session. So make sure that you use the Q&A section in your toolbar to pose questions, and think right now to yourself, what are the main questions that you have, and so that you can check and see that do we address them as we go through the session. And again, at the very end, I will look at those questions posed and attempt to address them. So for tonight, there's really two main focuses, and as with most things in life, there can be two totally separate issues, but then there's some interconnectivity. For the purpose of clarity, I would encourage you to think about two separate topics, and in the end, I will talk about how they intersect with one another. The first item is we're going to talk through the realities of our current needs on our current site for our students and growth options. That will be the first big section that we'll talk about. The second part is we're going to update everyone on where we are in considering a possible replication, and what that means and what that would look like. I want to be very clear, and you'll hear me say several times throughout this presentation that no decisions have been made and no plans have been made. We are most definitely in a data gathering and information gathering process, which has been, frankly, since October, some of the things that we've been doing to make sure that we have all the information that we need. So the first data that I want to share with you is that for some of you, you have been here the entire time, and you can recognize that in 2022, NYOS experienced an expansion where additional buildings were added on our existing site. And as a result, our classroom sizes increased significantly, more than doubled in some cases. And so you can see the fiscal year 25, the year we're in right now, as kids, luckily, every year they get older, they grow and thrive. This year that we just completed, our ninth grade was impacted in that expansion, in that the kids, as they travel down. And so next year it will be 10th grade. You can see the numbers in 11th and 12th grade. Those are still some of the original sizes of the classrooms pre-expansion. So the expansion of 22 will be fully realized in 27, 28. So you can see, if you look at the column fiscal year 28, those are our projected numbers for all grades pre-K through 12. We have limitations in pre-K 3 and pre-K 4. We only have a handful of classrooms. But then starting in our upper grades, we typically have 8 classrooms per grade level, and we can see the numbers from those. As we've discussed in previous sessions, what frequently happens really in any school system is that there's usually a break point between 5th and 6th grade, as parents are traditionally looking at, leaving elementary grades, going into middle school grades. You'll typically see parents looking around to see what options are. And then even larger time period of considering what options are between 8th and 9th grade. And so many times, especially in charter systems that have high schools, you'll see a little bit of a smaller number because some of our high school students might decide they want a large comprehensive high school for athletics, for more specialized classrooms. So we are still in the process as we're not fully seated. We're still traveling that road. It will be several years to say, like, on average, do 100% of our students travel between 8th and 9th grade? Once you get past 9th grade, other than any significant disciplinary issues or families getting transferred, you don't see a lot of changes in high school numbers because, again, students want to complete all the way to their senior year with their friends. And at NYOS, we have great retention rates, so that makes sense and is very true for us. And you just don't see a lot of transition in high school. Students want to get their credit hours, graduate, and they can see that future ahead of them. So I want to discuss, let me go back. When I arrived in June, I think at the end of June, I will be close to my full year. One of the very first things, as I was investigating and learning things about NIOS, was that existing staff that were here were saying, we have a lot of limitations on our size, and in classrooms, but also just movability, traffic, dismissal, all those kinds of things. And I was told, we're going to be okay for next year, which is this next year coming. But by the 3rd year, we're not going to be okay. We're going to have challenges in serving all of the students. And so um, that began the work in conjunction also with, we have a strategic plan. When I came on board, NIOS had just completed the strategic plan. And those of you who are here, remember that was done in collaboration with students, with our staff, including our teachers, and with our families. For me, that strategic plan was very significant because I was trying to voraciously learn as much as I could about NIOS and make sure that I could serve and support in the ways that were needed. The strategic plan has 4 pathways, and the 4th one charges us with developing a long-range financial plan and also a long-range facilities plan. And so that concept that we were going to have some insurmountable challenges in space, I began investigating and looking to what we needed to do. And so overwhelmingly, of course, we've heard the desire that students would stay on campus. And so I've investigated what that might look like. And so I'm going to walk you through some of the options. There's literally thousands of iterations of these, but when you pull them all together, gives you a feel for some of the things that are being considered. So let's call that this option 1. The option being remaining on campus, have everyone together. And the pros of that is obviously promoting unity, having that alignment and a collaboration because we're all physically together. But as space is a concern, being all together, also there's pros and cons to every option. And so I'll briefly go over 3 of those. One is reconfigure our campus spaces as they are right now. Another option within staying on campus would be having shared instructional spaces. And then another is reducing the number of students on campus or some combination. As you can imagine, lots of iterations within these. So to give more details about each one of these and talk a little bit about the pros and the cons. So 1A, remaining on current campus, that means that we would have to reconfigure our campus spaces, which means an analysis of our existing buildings and looking at where we could fit everyone in. And that would also mean significant construction that would have to occur in a very short time. As somebody who's newer to NYOS, I'm currently experiencing the very short summer that is NYOS because we go a little bit longer than the average schools. I'm tracking how many days until teachers return, how many days till teachers and students return. It's very short. So it's not just something that is done over the summer. Just once decisions are made, you have to have a significant time, even staying on campus. If you're going to reconfigure spaces, there's drywall, painting. Even for this next year, while we were able to fit everyone, we still had to build out a chemistry lab, and we still had to make some significant construction changes. So not this next year, 25, 26, but 26, 27, and 27, 28, we need to make or find an additional 10 to 14 classrooms. So we would have to look, and we have looked, we've looked multiple times in small and large groups at our existing map to consider where we could reconfigure campus spaces. We have identified some, we have not identified 14 additional rooms, but we are constantly looking at what the options are. And it is a challenge because if a room is used for another purpose, there's already somebody there. So where is that person going? So it's not an easy thing to do, but it is definitely one of the options. 1B is remaining on current campus, but having shared instructional spaces. And what that would mean is that teachers would share spaces. And so, for example, looking at if I was a classroom teacher, when is my lunch time? When is my planning time? And could someone hold a meeting in my classroom during that time? Could someone who's meeting in small groups use that space? It's just shared spaces. And so really maximizing at the level of who is where when, so that we could, again, achieve the desired effective remaining on the current campus. That's the pro. The con of that is we don't just use spaces just for teaching. Our teachers plan, they prepare, they have meetings where they're collaborating with their team and others. And so it's a lot of coordination that would have to happen because spaces would be used at all times. And that's assuming that with the shared space, we could still seat all of the students that we would need for 27, 28. And I will stop in a minute to look at the questions. The last one, 1C, is reduce students on campus. We've had in our sessions many times, especially with staff and with families, the question of like, well, can you stop taking on as many students or can we make changes? And so that's an option that's being considered. We would decrease the number of enrolled students. Another option even within that is modifying student schedules. An example might be in the high school saying either, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, these students are live and other people's are virtual. And then on Tuesday, Thursday, the reverse, or it could be AM sessions in person, PM sessions virtual. There are systems that offer remote learning full and part-time for students. As if we consider decreasing the number of enrolled students, there are many different ways to look at this. Looking at, for example, next year, as I said, 10th grade would expand as the expansion pushes into the next grade and the next grade. When we reach the space where we don't have the necessary space, that would be the year after for 11th grade. The question has been asked many times, well, could you limit the number of 11th graders? And then the next year, could you limit the number of 12th graders? Yes, we absolutely can. But for those families, if you have a student who's about to be in 11th grade year after next, are you going to be happy if there's a lottery and your child doesn't get in? We really believe in, it's part of our values of keeping with our students. They're become part of our family, and we want to make sure we serve them all the way through. We've had people who've asked about closing the high school. That's not something I want to do or the board wants to do. We've talked about eliminating pre-K3, pre-K4. We only use 3 classrooms in total for those classrooms right now. But every possible option is being examined and looked at. We have a board retreat coming later in June, where it is my role to gather and have these sessions, gather feedback from people, as well as all of the research and the data, and bring that and present it before the board for them to consider and ask all the questions. At that retreat, they won't take a vote or make any decisions. They will ask a millions of questions. And my goal is that I don't have to say, let me get that information and get it back to you. So I've been spending a tremendous amount of time working with internal and external partners to make sure we consider every option, getting the feedback from you guys, and then also gathering up everything that the board would need to consider. So I kind of walked through each one of these options and discussed the pros and the cons of each one. I know that this is a little bit of a summary of options, but this is some of the things that we've looked at in the vein of remaining on our current campus. And as I mentioned before, there are lots of iterations even within these, and there are iterations way beyond these. I want to communicate that we have considered, it feels like over 100 options, perhaps not that many, but we have really looked at and heard from anybody's great ideas. And if you have great ideas and you want us to consider them or feel like maybe we haven't, you can absolutely share them with us. I'm going to see if please offer me some grace because I am the presenter. I'm going to see if I can pull up the Q&A while keeping the slides. Okay, so one of the participants has asked, could buying the business next to Building D be an option? If you are talking about, I've officed in Building D initially, and if you're talking to the business, it would be to the left if you're inside the building, or to the right if you're standing outside of the building. I believe it's some kind of a laundry service. The reality is they have zero interest in leasing or selling their property to us. We have reached out to them. We have, and then external folks on our behalf, and they really have no interest. I will also say that if you're maybe somebody may be thinking about, there is some property right across from Building D on the other side of the street that's a beautiful piece of land. And for me personally, like I was like, okay, could we get that land? And there are lots of options of what we could do with that land. But it's one of the most expensive options. Just the land alone is valued at over $5 million. And so, it could be things like building a high school there or having temporary portables there while we do something on site. And so it's a lot of layered cost, but it will be within the list or the chart of options that we are considering. But thus far, we haven't seen any interest on the owners of that property in leasing or selling that property. So we're definitely considering both on campus and near us options. So that's a nice segue. I'm going to now go into a new section, which is looking at if on-site is not the best option, or if we want to consider other options, what might we do to open a campus to accommodate growth nearby? That doesn't mean that we are going to do that, but it's two options that we've looked at, is like what could be done to keep us on-site. If none of those options seem great, then what might be nearby? And so I want to share some of the information on that. So this is not a current list. I meet with our group that considers properties. It feels like almost every week. And so you can imagine, it's just like looking for a home or an apartment to rent. What might be available today, it changes over time. You hear from friends, there are things that are discovered. So we've considered all of these sites, and we have a fresh list almost every time we get together. My goal was to find something that's within 3 miles, if at all possible. We did look at things that were further away. And so we've been working with a partner. Their name is Blueprint, and that's really their focus, is looking at both on-site options and the costs of those, as well as property nearby. And so opening a campus to accommodate for our growth, we've been working with them. There was a day where I hopped in a vehicle with Kurt, and we went and drove and looked at some of the sites to get a real feel for what the lived experience would be like in the drive. So we've just again been gathering data to consider that option as well. I want to back up and say that with any option, there are pros and there are cons. The pro of having a site nearby is that you could conceivably improve pickup and drop off for both sites. We have a bus where we could run a route to help families who have children at both sites. It would make it less crowded because those over 500 high school students would be at a different site. It could mean we could improve food facilities for both sites because again, you would have less students at the main site and you could create a good opportunity for high school students and also looking at sports and play spaces. So depending on the site that would be selected, we could improve some significant areas where it's needed. The existing NYOS site still has some space, but there's very little actual building space available. One of the very first analysis that we did was for that, there's really only one available space to drop a portable, and that would shut down our play space for a significant amount of time to run water, electricity. The older spaces that we have on site, building B, building D, high school, those have a different zoning, and that would cause even additional work because it is older, and then also requirements from the state on what you can and cannot do within a site, right? So lots of things to consider. So this is a timeline. If we were going to open a campus to accommodate for growth, what would that look like in time and space? And what, as you know, someone can't wake up tomorrow and say, yes, we're going to do this. There is a long journey of things that has to happen. The decision would have to be made. As I mentioned before, our board is going to have a retreat in June. We have a board meeting on June the 10th. Nothing around this growth and accommodation, possible replication. No decisions will be made at that June 10th board meeting. We will have the retreat on the 20th. And then on the 26th, we have another board meeting. And our plan, our intention is that at that June 26th board meeting, they will discuss, you know, we've brought all of the data, we've brought all the considerations, all the ideas, all the feedback from families, all the feedback from staff. We have questioned, we have asked, we have looked at every aspect, every angle, and that board members consider, you know, all the things. And when they come to that 26th board meeting, that they would make some decisions about what we want to do about the growth at our existing site. That is the goal because we are on a time crunch to get whatever we decide, whether we stay on campus or we get a site nearby. There's a tremendous amount of work that has to be done in order to be ready for that 26-27 school year. So in that, you can see on the timeline in that year to split, and then you can see down at facility, you have to select what you're going to do this year. And then the last row, you see fundraising and resources. We would have to engage with foundations that support growth. And we would also have to do a significant amount of fundraising in order to fund the work that we would want to do. I'm going to talk a little bit more about fundraising and resources in just a second. And I'm going to show this screen the pros and the cons of opening a satellite campus. From the things that I've heard from our partners, from our families, from internal folks, the pros are that we could have improved facilities for our students, the flow of traffic, pickup and drop off. Cons are included are, you know, the idea that when you are separate, you have to be very intentional about community building, having times together, that kind of thing, and considering costs, whether we stay together or we have a separate site. Those are all considerations that we need to look at. So I'm going to again see if I can look at our questions. Technology is wonderful until it is not. I'm trying to get there we go, the chat and the Q&A. So one person asked to please explain the jump of 144 students to 160. And then are 14 classrooms needed next year or in 3 to 4 years? So I'll answer both of those. I'll go back at the very end and I'll show the growth chart. And I'll use very round numbers. Pre-expansion in 2022, class sizes were between 79 and 100 students. Like, those are just using very round numbers. But after 2 new buildings were created, we were able to welcome a lot more students in 2022. And so elementary really was the initial focus. And so classrooms jumped up to a little, not quite 200. And so you almost doubled the number of students who are enrolled by grade level. And as students get older and go to the next grade and the next grade, we're seeing the impact of that. So it's passed through over years through middle school. And this year we welcomed our very first 9th grade class. That's an expanded, they started in elementary and they've gone through the years. Next year it will be 10th grade. The next year 11th, and then the next year 12th grade, as those same students stay with us and they just develop and continue on to the next grade. 14 classrooms are not needed this next year. We're fine for next year. We have accommodated for that expansion that's going to happen in 10th as a result of our kids growing from year to year. It's the next year. It's 26, 27, where we'll need probably 6 classrooms. And then the next year after 27, 28, we'll need somewhere between 10 and 14 classrooms. And we want to plan for 14 because even that 14 is a conservative number, but we don't want to be so conservative that we by default don't have enough space from the get-go. So that is our goal. And then I'm going to see if I can go to, I think there are just a few more questions, and then I'll go on to the next section. There we go. Let's see if I can get the drop down. Okay. So another question, would one way to reduce the number of enrolled students without asking students to leave to be stop adding 16 extra seats between elementary and secondary students? If there are 144 students in a grade elementary and 160 students grade in secondary, why are we increasing the secondary numbers beyond the previous elementary doubling if we don't have space for them? Discontinuing those extra seats would not require anyone to leave and seats to be left open, as elementary students could leave and still be filled up at 144. So we haven't increased numbers. We really only fill, if a family says, we need to move to Dallas, we fill those spots. We've kept with the same sections that were planned for expansion. And in almost every session, somebody has asked about a slow reduction. That is something for sure that we could consider, but we also have to, part of the uniqueness of NYOS is small class size. And so there is a ratio at which paying for a teacher, you have to fit within the budget. And so we have to be mindful. We live on a very tight budget because of the small class size, and that we're very committed to very high quality teachers. So it's a very tight mixture. And so while just looking at student numbers to say every time somebody moves away, or we're going to choose not to do that, it gets to a point that it's not budgetarily, it doesn't work in the budget. And so it is something that the board will discuss and something to consider, but you also have to look at the impacts to the overall budget to make sure that we can continue to run high quality programs. Another question is that it seems like there was a lack of foresight in expanding the elementary and middle school enrollment without a long-term plan for the consequences of that growth. I know you've only been here a year, but why was the future of NYOS students not considered when all the planning was happening years ago? I was not here. I've done my due diligence to try and gather up as much information as possible. I don't think that there was an intentional plan to run out of space. Everyone that I've ever met who was there previously or now, that's not the kind of thing they would do. I do think we have increased our staffing over time, things like instructional coaches, interventionists, things like that. have increased our staffing this year because we do live on a tight budget. We did not want um, to change our staffing model, but I did lean out the district office as much as possible because it is a very austere budget. And so I think also when you're going through an expansion, if you raise the funds that you need, it can sometimes give you a false sense of what your everyday living budget is. And so I think that it takes a person really focused on budget to not, I don't want to say get distracted, but not use that experience to say this is how it's going to be forever. But that is my best answer. For those who weren't here, what was the plan for the high school expansion seniors? Surely there was something presented to families when they proposed it. Again, we have not said, like, let's just fill up buildings as we go. We really have continued the students who started in elementary, um, continuing serving the families that we started with. And so that was always the plan. What about floating teachers is another question. Some schools have elective teachers teach classes in other teachers' classroom during conference. That was when I was talking about shared classrooms and shared spaces, which was one of the options in one, everybody staying on site. That is definitely something that will be considered, and there are pros and cons to that. Another, this is one angle of the possibility to manage time, gather funding, and other resources. Regarding community unity, the elementary and upper grades are fairly separate communities in my experience. Ideas, if it's possible to stop enrollment for grades 6 through 12 for 3 years, but retain the highest number of upper school teacher FTEs to have tenured educators in smaller classes up to 5th grade. Also, matriculate the most elementary grades possible on campus and keep current campus as a middle and high school while replicating the elementary on a new replication campus. And then only fill seats from re-registration, opening, and lottery. This provides a longer span of site search and replication campus development, using growth projection to size the campus using known funding constrictions for the development and annual use. These are all really great ideas, and myself and my team will gather these and we'll be sharing them at our board retreat and considering them. In response to that last idea, it's for sure something we can do, but the goal has never been to grow and expand the existing site, but rather just serve the students that we have and continue those numbers as they're fully seated as all the way to 12th grade, and that would just continue, not to expand any further. And so to stop enrolling students in 6 through 12 for 3 years, in theory, looking at the pure numbers, for sure that's a consideration. But I feel like I've really gotten to know our families, PTA families, families at events, talking to people in board meetings and just around the campus. And I think about, a parent who may have a child in kindergarten or first grade, and they have a child 2 years from now that would be in 6th grade or 7th grade. And so many of our families choose NYOS, not only because it's a top-rated district, but also a place where all of their children can attend. And so by creating that gappiness for 3 years, that will be frustrating to families. And so that would be a challenge, both for our families and for ourselves. But we'll definitely consider all of these ideas. So I'm going to go on to the second section of tonight, and this is, remember when if you weren't with us when we started, there are two items to discuss, and I asked that we kind of keep them separated. They are connected through one topic, and I will at the end go through that. But now we're transitioning into the idea of replication. The first section, which was growth, was dealing with what is needed for our existing campus. As we were looking at options for that, we also began looking at what might it look like to replicate and offer NYOS in a completely different part outside of Austin. And so this would be a replication, building a new system pre-K through 8 to serve a new set of families, probably just outside of Austin, maybe 30, 40 minutes away. And so that we can mirror the current model on our site to offer to more families the great programming that we have. What you see here is a green light chart. As part of the research that I was charged with, we also worked with our second partner, which is Bellwether. And Bellwether, that is part of the work that they do. So we met almost weekly, initially with myself and my team. Then eventually we had a small committee that we have now expanded to include families, students, staff, to look at all aspects of a true replication. And this green light chart are some of the requirements. I or the board can't wake up tomorrow and say, yes, let's do this. There's a very long process, a lot of voting that has to occur by the board. And these are the criteria that the board would consider before they would green light a replication or not. This is not something we would do overnight. It's a 3 to 4 year journey for anyone who's interested in replication. So I won't read all of this to you, but I will just quickly kind of go through. Academic performance obviously is important for any system that's considering replication. And so looking at a state rating, A would mean go, that we are ready to consider that. If we were B rated, it would mean that the board would need to discuss that and decide if that felt like it was okay where our status was. If we were C, it would be absolutely not, a no-go. Looking at student culture, what is our current student retention? What is our current parent satisfaction? Stakeholder support. Many systems, if they're looking at replication, there are events that are held in the area that's selected where you're talking to families there. Do we have enough students who are interested? Do we have enough families that are interested? There are wait lists that are created. We create targets. You don't open the school with 1,400 students initially. You open it slowly and you decide, are you going to have enough students to sustain the model as it's designed? You look at family and staff sentiment regarding the growth. You measure all of that. You look at talent, you look at teacher talent. What is your talent pipeline? What is our current teacher satisfaction? What is our current student teacher retention? Finance obviously is a significant part of the decision-making process. We look at how many days of cash on hand do we have as required by law? Are we meeting that requirement or not? We look at our fundraising. Are we raising enough funds? We know that charter school funding is inequitable as compared to traditional ISDs. It is improving, but fundraising is a big part of that work that we would need to do. Our debt service ratio, are we within the guidelines that's considered a healthy district or not? What is our payroll looking like? And lastly, we have to raise capital and we have to identify at least 2 sites, obviously. If we're looking at an area and considering and we can't find a place to have the school, then that would be a challenge as well. The last thing that I want to share about replication is when you're considering something that's obviously going to cost a significant amount of money, you work with foundations. And in my time as a superintendent in other districts, different cities have different foundations. Here in Austin, we really only have one foundation, and that's KLE. KLE is focused on 2 things. The first being instructional technology or AI or any kind of technology in education. The founder of KLE came from Dell, so that's a passion of his. But really, the largest portion of their foundation dollars go to charter expansion. They're very passionate about charter schools, about the innovation that occurs. And so they fund charter expansion, which really means how many students are in seats, new students and new seats. And so they really support charters that want to expand. Nationally, there is a group called Charter School Growth Fund, and they solely fund charter expansion. And so I have had conversations with both of those groups. And so in order to do a true replication, you would almost have to engage Charter School Growth Fund and or KLE to give you the significant dollars that it requires in order to open a new site. It will not completely fund. There will still be fundraising that will be involved in order to raise those funds. When I was having conversations with Charter School Growth Fund, they were very interested in replication by NYOS because we, again, have a great reputation. It's a school that people want to attend. We have a robust wait list that you don't always see at other charters. And so they were they like to talk to charters that are successful and that people want to attend. So they were very interested in talking with us. And so they typically do not support what I was discussing earlier, that the growth issue, that's not something they would typically do because we're not interested in adding seats at the level of 1,400 students. But as we were talking about the idea of replication, they did indicate that they would be able to support that growth work that we need to do if it also included a larger replication commitment. So again, nothing has been decided. We are in the data and information gathering process, but we felt it was very important, and that's why we've had these sessions to not only give you guys information, let you know where we are, but also get feedback from you, what your thinking is, how you're feeling about things. So just as a bit of a repetition, this is the green light chart that the board would be looking at. They can make some tweaks. They can make it more rigorous, less rigorous, consider each one, make sure these are the things that we need to look at. It's in a way a bit of a report card, but it gives you an indicator and lets you guys see also that, again, it's not something that one person decides overnight, and it's not an overnight process. It's a 3 to 4 year process with lots of voting along the way as we go. Usually when we present these sessions, people want to know where we might grow and replicate, both because some of our families do drive long distances, as do our teachers. So early on, we were looking at 3 sites, and then as time has progressed, there have been 5 areas. It's not areas that we just like. It's really looking at where do we see lots of families that would be interested in places where there's not as many charter offerings. As this is a long process, really none of these circles indicate where we will for sure replicate a campus. It just gives you a feeling for the areas that we're considering. As I said, this is a 3 to 4 year process at a minimum. So we know from demographers things can change, right? People move to different areas. There are some places like Hutto that are fast growth areas because it's just people decided all of a sudden to go to those areas. So there are lots of options, but we always like to share the information that we have. And so now I'm going to go back to any other questions that we have. Why would we want to replicate when we still have so much to figure out on the current campus? How does that help our current campus? We have so many things we could fundraise for that would help our current campus. Why would we instead want to divert our efforts to replicate? It's a good question. I can make the case on either side. We do have plenty of things that we need to work on our campus, but part of if we as a community, if our board decided to continue to work towards and consider replication, part of that is improving the practices that we have on our existing site. There is also an additional infusion of funds that come both from foundations, but then also enrollment from that replication that does support our overall campus. Fundraise, yes, we could absolutely use all of our fundraising funds for our existing campus, no doubt. I've worked really hard this year to increase the amount of fundraising so that we can increase the resources that we have, and PTA does a fantastic job as well. Another question, why would we replicate K through 8 in lieu of K through 12 or replicate 6 through 12? Since secondary charters are underrepresented in this area? That's a great question. Typically, you see charters when they replicate for a K through 8 because high schools are expensive and complex. They are very expensive, and that's why you see underrepresentation of high schools. The service that's available to children and their families matches the demand. When you see that not many, but some of our students choose to go to a comprehensive high school because of increased or more robust, detailed programming that smaller charters cannot sustain. That's why you'll see less high schools in the charter fields. Now, there are charters that are solely high school because their enrollment is larger and they can support that. We considered high school as we were looking at the replication, and we will still continue to, but typically what we're seeing through the research is that the most successful replications are K through 8. Usually in these sessions, somebody will ask about, if we open a school in another area, can those students attend our high school? And our answer has always been that our intention is that for our existing site, the students who are attending there are prioritized for high school. But if there were spaces available, like let's say some students decide to go to a comprehensive and there's 5 positions, that other site, they would get priority after our students have enrolled for those existing site spaces. And then after they had been considered, if there was somebody who had moved into the neighborhood, they would be put in via lottery if there was a need. Let's see. Last question, why is this replication project being given so much time and thought right now when we have a problem on our current campus for our current families and students that has yet to be solved? Should we not make sure the absolute focus right now is on serving the current population, not splitting the focus between our campus and something shiny and new? Especially when additional fundraising for that tiny, shiny new school would be involved. To be honest, a mere indication of support from one of these companies doesn't seem like it would be worth it to try and do all that extra fundraising for a replicated campus on top of everything else. Great question. So the most urgent need is what we need to solve for our campus. It is only, as I said at the very beginning, the two issues are completely separate, but only connected through funding. If we chose not to replicate, that's a-okay. But then the funding would not come through KLE or through Charter School Growth Fund. We would have to fundraise and seek funding on our own. And if that's the choice that is made, then we'll do that. Replication, yes, work has to be done all along the way, but it's not going to take over our lives because it is a 3 to 4 year project. You have to do things all along the way in order to be prepared, because if you waited 4 years to say we want to replicate then, which we can, then you're going to be another 3 to 4 years out before you would do that replication. And that's why the thoughtful gathering of all the information and why it requires voting along the way, because it's not a one vote, like, yes, we're going to replicate, and then it's never discussed again. More questions are coming in. If we do the replication and the organization that would support it also provides support for our current campus, do we know what that support would look like? Would it be enough to build up? It's really the same answer for both sites. They'll give her what they call I'm trying to think of the word, a capacity grant of money to support us in the growth that we need to do on our existing campus as far as addressing the need of our 11th to 12th. They would give us a significant amount of money. I don't have a dollar amount right now. We've talked in loose terms because there's an application process for that that we would have to pursue. But yes, they would provide us some funding. We would still have to do some fundraising no matter what. The same could be said for the replication. It would be a larger amount of money that would be given to us, and then we would have to fundraise for the additional. There is no external funder who gives you all of the money needed to build or replicate a school. How much funding for a replication would actually go towards the current NYOS campus? I think it's all of our responsibilities, the board and mine as well, to be good stewards of any funding. The funding we receive right now is public funding. And so that's the same as saying it's money that comes from me, money that comes from you. We have to be good stewards of that money. So you have to look at all of the needs, and you have to make sure that you build a budget that's going to address the needs of all of the system. Who makes the ultimate decision for this? Ultimately, it is our board who makes the decision about whether what we want to do about our current site as far as supporting our existing students and whether we want to pursue a replication. It is my responsibility to gather as much data and information as possible and present that to the board. I will share my thoughts and my recommendations, but ultimately, we have a fantastic board who is made up of community members and parents, and they're very thoughtful. They don't make decisions quickly. And then at the last board meeting in June on the 26th, um, we are on schedule to have them discuss and vote on what to do with our existing site as far as supporting our students. They could make a recommendation and vote on it. They could say they need more information. That is the decision of the board. Is it probable that replication will split the enrollment and relieve the need to make a second high school? It is not probable. You will likely have some families, like I'm just gonna randomly say, like what if we were to replicate in Hutto? You might have some families who are attending now who say, you know what, Hutto's actually closer for us or closer to where we live. I as a parent drive in every day to work in Austin, but it's Hutto's closer to our home, and so they might decide to send their children there. You might have teachers who say the same thing. That's not uncommon in situations like this, but it's going to be a handful. It won't be a significant enough of a number. Another person, I know part of your budget process has to be streamlined and minimize your admin team. How do you plan to successfully fundraise with such a bare bones team? Part of the design of NYOS, I think we have a fantastic design that does create some constraints. We have very small class size, and funding comes predominantly in schools for the number of students you have in seats. So part of coming on board NYOS and learning about what's important to students and families is I heard loud and clear the commitment to small class size is something that we believe strongly in, and I have no problem supporting that. At the same time, we also have a commitment to teachers having autonomy and building their capacity. And we have a great teaching staff, and we have a robust teaching staff. We have classroom teachers. We also have instructional coaches who support our staff. We have interventionists who support our students on top of their existing classroom sessions. We have administrators, assistant principals, and you can imagine all the ancillary staff, PE, music, art. So I don't think that we have a bloated or over extended number of staff, but we do have a good staffing, but that costs money. And so it is part of the charge of myself and the board to make sure that we do create a realistic budget and that we stick to it. And if there's something that the students or the teachers need, that we fundraise for those things. And I mentioned earlier, our PTA group is very robust and does a great job. And then we've increased the funding for the NYOS fund. This year, I committed funds from the NYOS fund to support the addition of a new chemistry lab for secondary. We increased our technology for our students in elementary. We increased money for training. So we will continue to increase our fundraising overall to make sure that anything that's not covered by the budget is something that we can cover and make happen for our students. I am going to go and check and see if there are any other questions. And while I do that, I want to point out two items. There's nothing more frustrating when somebody says, oh, you can find it online, and then you go to look for it and you can't find it because you don't know exactly where to go. The other day, I screenshot this and added it to the presentation. If you go to nyos.org, go to the About button at the top, and you'll see right here are frequently asked questions. And when you click on that, it will open up a new page. And those are all the questions that we've gathered, not specifically every single question, but we've gathered the trending questions that people frequently ask, and we have responses there. Then right below that, you see growth and replication. The information that we've shared here is there. And then we will also have additional information that we will add as we go. And then I also want to leave us with this QR code, which is a place for you to give us feedback about how you're feeling. Some of you have shared on the chat. Some of you may still be thinking about it, but please consider scanning this QR code with your phone so that you can give us your thoughts. And so I'm going down to the last few question and answers. There's four more. I joined late, but I have a question from the first section. Why would enrollment move from 144 to 160 in high school? That is adding numbers, not just serving current students. I'm going to go back, Kathy, and I'm going to gather the data because I don't want to give you an answer without being very responsive to that answer and being very specific. To my knowledge, um, we have 8 classrooms in elementary for every grade level, and those students in those classrooms, as they travel up to middle school and high school, those are the students we're serving. To my knowledge, we are not pursuing additional enrollment outside of those students. I feel like as I've passed through this year, I work really closely with James Douglas, who leads our enrollment and attendance. And, for example, I talked earlier about how ninth grade is typically when some families will say, I want a big comprehensive high school. For example, my son played football. He wanted to be on that big traditional high school team. So we considered charters and traditional ISDs. So we had some spots that were available in ninth grade that we had planned for those students who were in eighth grade. So if someone moves to Iowa, if someone makes another choice, we only fill those spots that we've allotted. We don't continue to expand. So I'll further gather that information and I can reach back out to you. The next question. Thank you. This seems like you've put together a clear and thoughtful process to assess what NYOS needs to do. I really appreciate you for doing this virtual session and offering alternatives for families to learn about it. Well, thank you. I want you to know that I'm really only an email away. We really try hard to get responses back to you within 24 hours. We want to make sure you have everything that you need and that you are informed. Danielle, I have a rising eighth grader and a fourth grader. We'd be impacted by this regardless. So it's important to know as we move forward in their education. Absolutely. And again, like I said at the beginning, our goal is when we welcome students in, that's usually pre-K, kinder, first grade, that we retain and keep those students all the way through their journey. That's always been the goal, and we want to continue that work. And so we have a pretty good retention rate, and we would like to keep it. Susie, would it be possible to postpone the decision date until school is in session? Anything is possible, Susie. It's balancing out the urgency of the time it takes, whether we're outfitting new classrooms in our existing session, our existing campus, or something nearby. In the past, pre-COVID, construction and renovation could take as short as 6 months. What used to take 6 months now takes a year and a half. So it is for the board balancing out that they know that in 26, 27, we need to have everything ready and in place for students so that they can focus on learning. Kathy, I saw a chart shared yesterday showing future enrollment. I did share that again tonight, Kathy. It was one of the very first slides, and I can go back up to it again, and it will be posted online. Steph, 8 classes, 18 students, 144. Future school years have numbers at 160. I'll get that number and get it out. In middle school, I don't want to misspeak, but I believe middle school is 20 to 1 and high school has been 22 to 1. But I don't want you to think that in high school, all classrooms are sitting at 22. You have, as you get into more specialized, like advanced academics, college and career, some of those classes are very tiny. You can have 4 students in a classroom depending on the course that they're taking because there's a lot more diversity in their course options. So the ratios are a little bit higher. But I will gather that up and I'll put that in the FAQ for you guys. Thank you guys for asking that. I think that that's the majority of the questions. I want to appreciate you guys so much for joining me tonight. You asked great questions, and we will add anything new that's not covered in the FAQ section, and we'll put out information sharing that it's updated. And then we will also keep you guys updated as we move forward. We have our board president's name listed on our website, as is my email address and name. And then we're going to add all of our board members so that you have people that you can reach out to should you have any questions or want to give your thoughts and your feedback. Thank you again for being with me tonight, and I hope you have a great evening. Bye-bye.